elsewhere during the winter, then they say, okay, go in and cut them down. Okay, well that doesn't work, because when the bat comes back, his whole habitat's gone. Okay, so, but again, it's for whatever the reason of making money or making this new development or whatever. But when you cut trees in the spring, you've got all these nesting birds, especially things like owls or other things that are cavity nesters, chickadees, titmice, flying squirrels, bats. You come in and you cut down these trees, especially trees that are very large, that have cavities in them. You knock those trees down, you have taken care of that nest to where they're not going to make it. You know, the parents will come back to try to feed them, but the tree's laying on the ground. Okay, that isn't going to work. So the timing can be very, very critical on things like the nesting birds and insects as well. You've got things like this. Here's a Luna moth. I don't know if you're familiar with the Luna moth, but it's a beautiful moth. It's kiwi colored green. Its wingspan is almost as long as from fingertip to thumb tip. But it makes its cocoon to spend the winter in this cocoon. So when you come in and you clear cut an area, we don't even know what we are dispatching by doing that, because we don't even know a lot of times what's in these woods. Some of these woods haven't been studied, so we may not know all the species that may be impacted by, you know, the habitat degradation, whatever we're doing to it. So it would be helpful if we could, you know, create some incentive programs where, like, utility companies or developers, you know, to use some of these options, use some of these corridors like this, so that they're being utilized in a way of just not being totally cement or totally asphalt. We've made some strides in the way that we do surface cover now, where we have permeable, you know, landscaping, we have permeable parking lots, things like that, where the water isn't all channeled into a little tube that goes into a culvert that goes out, and nothing in the area gets any water because they're channeling it away from the parking lots. Now we've got it to where they're permeable, the water can go ahead and go through, but, you know, even to where we can provide some incentives that way. Logging or fragmenting woodland wetlands, vernal pools, things like that can be really, really critical, because these are some of our rare habitats, and when you have rare habitats, you have rare species that live there. So when we do that, we are changing the water system in that area. We go in, you know, we're third in the country behind California, maybe Texas. We haven't changed in filling in our wetlands through our whole existence. We're right up there. We go in, we see a wetland, we want to put something on that area or on that land. They go in and they fill it. They cover it all up. And then they put their structure on there, and in about, you know, a year or two or three, they find that there is settling and they're building. The door's no longer open, the window's no longer shut, because now this is happening. We do a lot of that. I looked at a property for someone next to where they were going to put in a post office, and there was some vernal pools in there. Did this report, I said, you've got a couple of vernal pools in here, and here are the species that are in here. There's a lot of amphibians, things like that. Went out a week later, and everything was totally brown. They went in, and they sprayed everything with Roundup. And then they walked out with the developer, and they said, you know what, we're not really sure what she's talking about, but there isn't a frog to be found here. So they went in, and that's what they did. So that there wasn't any proof that there was anything living there. They came in, they filled it all in, and now it's a post office. Well, they're not really sure why they can't lock their doors so well, because the door's no longer shut. Because when you have a water system like a vernal pool, or like a fen, or a bog, or a woodland wetland, that is water that's coming up from below. There's springs, things like that. You can put all the fill you want on it. It's not going to make that water go away. That water is going to continue to fill that system, because that's the geology of the area. You would be better served to protect that wetland and build somewhere else, or build away from it, and not interrupt the flow of the water. Because if you're putting your building there, you are going to see that water in a different way, and you're probably not going to be very happy about it. So they can be, when you go in and you say you have a woodland swamp like this, or a woodland wetland, you go in there and you cut that, and you say, okay, I'm going to fill this in. Well, just by cutting the trees, you've impacted the creatures that live there, because the shade is important to them. A lot of these are shade-loving plants. You can't put them hours of sun every day, they're not going to make it. Okay, nor is the ground going to support the organisms that were in it because it was wet or it was moist. When that forest cover is removed and the ambient temperature of the forest goes up, things start to disappear because they can't handle that. Losing that tree cover also heats up the forest floor, which impacts the understory denizens, frogs, toads, salamanders, the leaf litter, the aquatic and soil viability changes, the invertebrates change. So if your ground used to be moist and now it's not because it gets all these hours of sun during the day, well, the salamanders that came out in the spring and the peepers that came out and made all that great noise and sung and did all their thing, did their whole life cycle, well, they've got to do something for the rest of the year because that's it. That's their big hurrah. And if that pool isn't there and they come back out of the ground next spring, they're going to be like, wait a minute, that's just like going home one night and your house not being there. What are you going to do? Okay, it's not very easy for them to start walking around and looking for another vernal pool because chances are there aren't going to be any in that area if they have filled this one or removed the trees to change that habitat. So you've got, think of things, the soil will totally change. The makeup of the soil will change. The invertebrates that live in the soil that feed these wonderful little spotted salamanders. This is one of our little aquatic sow bugs. You think, oh, sow bug, I'm going to step on it if I see it because it's just a creepy crawler. But this provides a lot of food in the aquatic systems for other creatures. Things like cinnamon fern. They like to be in those wooded areas. They like to be around vernal pools or around wooded wetlands. You come in and you put a cinnamon fern in the middle of a filled-in area that's going to get a bunch of sun. It's going to go a couple of years and then it's going to be done. Or the egg masses of Jefferson salamanders or wood frogs, any of those things. They need to be in the water. And they even have an adaptation to where when they lay these eggs, they're all in a gel. And once the eggs are laid, the gel then expands by absorbing the water of the vernal pool or of the water system. And that is to keep them moist if that vernal pool should dry up before they have hatched and are able to climb out of that pool. So they have their own little safeguards, but we are rapidly going through these properties and through these systems so quickly that even their little gel, hiding place and egg mass can't compete with how we remove the water or what's feeding it. So what can we do? Well, again, try to keep those systems intact. Build away from them. Be happy that you have a system like that because there are so few and far between now because we've either filled them in or we've done other things to them, we've drained them. We've got, down where I live in Stark County, I've got a farmer that's got this huge, one year it's corn, one year it's beans, but in the middle of it, it's very low and there's obviously a spring. And you get these great shorebirds and ducks come in the spring when the water raises. So a couple years ago, he went in and he trenched it and he put in some drain tile in there. And every spring and every fall, it's still loaded, this middle section is still loaded with water and with ducks and everything. And he drives this little tractor around it and nothing is planted there because it can't grow, it's too wet. But if he'd have just done that in the beginning and not gone to all that expense of trying to make it so that he could plant it, he probably lost 2 acres of land. In the grand scheme of things, he's probably planting on 90 acres of land. So again, sometimes we have to think about, let's do a little bit different. And think about, you have a system like this, the buffer around it is very important. You don't want to plant, or you don't want to till, or you don't want to put a house right next to this kind of a system. Because that system, again, is getting fed by groundwater, or it's got hydric soils around it, which means it's probably very high in clay in order to hold that water. Not necessarily where you want to build. So give it some room, give it some buffer, and that's why, like at the museum, we're over 10,000 acres of protected land now in many areas across Northeast Ohio. And the reason is we are trying to protect these habitats, these ecosystems, because either there's rare plants or there's really great birds that are nesting or really good insects, but all of it is because we're trying to save the system and we're trying to save the buffer for the system. So sometimes we think, well, why is the park protecting this pond and then all that land around that pond just enough to protect the pond. If you don't protect the buffer, it's not going to be a pond after so many years. So flooding, water quality, all of that can change. Some of our other undesirable land use practices, impacting our meadow habitat with intensive farming. You know, I live across from a farm that basically does this. It's planted right up to the edge of the road. One of the comments that we frequently make is what's called the silence of the corn. Have you ever stood